Hello, everyone. This is Dr. S of the University of Science and Technology of Southern Philippines. Today, I shall be sharing with you some reviews and recommendations for publishing articles in social sciences. More specifically, I shall be covering about the importance of publishing, the editor's insights, why our papers are being rejected, and the editor's recommendations so that our papers will be accepted or considered for publication. We used to hear publish or perish. It seems we only have two choices, whether our scholarly work should be published so that our names will go today and beyond our ages, or we perish and our names, being scholars, will eventually die its natural death, and we don't want that to happen. So what are the benefits of publication, and why do we publish our research articles? Among those are, of course, career path and career advancement. We get to collaborate with other scholars. We will be recognized professionally. We will be providing or giving impact to society. Of course, we will be visible among others. We can contribute knowledge to the field among others. So it means to say that when we publish our research articles, we will be enjoying a lot of benefits. What's the reason why we should not publish, right? Research publication can be called from our thesis or dissertations. It can be teacher initiated, or it can be a funded researches. Whatever it is, still we are encouraged to do that. How do we start publication? How do we start writing publishable papers? First, we need to visit our target journal. For example, because I am into educational technology, then I will consider British Journal of Educational Technology. And then I will look into their aims and scope so that I will see if the paper I have in mind is acceptable to this journal, or we will be able to check what this journal or what topics this journal wants to publish. And then another thing that we will need to consider when choosing a journal is the abstracting and indexing. We want our papers to be published in ISI or Scopus Index journals. And then visit the editorial section and see what are the trending topics that this journal is publishing, so that we will be assured that the topic that we are going to study or we are going to endeavor for our research is worthy to be accepted in this journal. No journal will accept an obsolete topic, so we need to consider that. Okay? And it is very important that when you want to publish in this particular journal, we have to cite an article or two that they have published. Because in the first place, what is your business doing in this journal if you are not even reading their publications? So it's just a common sense. It just makes sense to cite a paper or two from this journal. What are the common reasons why our articles are rejected upfront by the editors? Okay, we will visit Elsevier, Taylor and Francis, and Sage publications. What are their thoughts about rejecting journals, and why? What do the editors say why they reject articles for publication? According to Elsevier, our articles may contain elements that are suspected to be plagiarized, or it is currently under review at another journal. So, it is a big no-no when you submit your article to different journals at the same time. Or if our manuscript is incomplete, of course, who will receive this kind of articles? Or the article does not conform to the journal's guidelines. It uses poor language. The references is incomplete, or you are using old references, or your references are from unreliable sources. Another reason could be that the procedures or the analysis of the data is seen to be defective. The conclusions cannot be justified on the basis of the rest of the papers. The paper is incomprehensible or it is boring. Definitely, if your paper are like this, then Elsevier will not accept our papers. Then how about Sage? What do they say about our papers being rejected? According to Sage, our paper lack novelty, uses inappropriate research design. It has poor methodological descriptions. The quality of writing is poor and the rationale of the study is weak. Then we have to think. How about Taylor and Francis? According to the editors, we sent our articles to the wrong journals. Or the one that we sent is not a true journal article. And we do not follow the journal's guidelines in submitting articles. Or our manuscript is unsound, it is unethical, or it lacks objectivity. In other words, from the three publishers, the common thing there is that the methodology of our paper is not objective, it is not clear, it is not rigor. Why methodology? The methodology section of our articles is where we establish our expertise in research methods. And the methodology section is where other researchers or future researchers will base so that they can replicate or they will replicate our study. So if the methodology section of our study is faulty, then it is very likely that the editors of the journals that we want our papers published will reject our paper outright. And we don't want that to happen. According to the editors of the Journal of Applied Structural Equation Modeling, they said that several recurring shortcomings in the manuscripts, particularly in relation to methodology, are detrimental and it results to outright desk rejection. And we don't want that to happen to our hard-labored research articles. In addition, Jordan and Troth in 2020 mentioned that a rigorous method is an important part of editors' and reviewers' assessments of a manuscript for publication. This is to ensure more trustworthy findings of our studies. More often, we read this in some articles or we write this in our articles. We say the data were collected from 300 participants, or we write the questionnaires were validated by experts. Now, what do editors say? They would say this is insufficient because our articles should not only demonstrate efforts in carrying out research activities, but more importantly, it should assure the editors and the reviewers the rigor of the methodology of our work. So, in this talk, I shall be discussing with you some recommendations so that our papers will be accepted. The first thing that we're going to consider is the operationalization, meaning to say the operational definition of the variables in our study. Accordingly, a good operationalization of the variables in our study contributes to the clarity of the study constructs and the accuracy of the instruments. Meaning to say that if it if the variables are concretely defined, then it is easy for us to look for the most appropriate research instrument that will measure this variable. Therefore, we need to explicitly operationally define the variables in our study. And once we have operationally defined the variables, then we are going to choose the items or the scales that will best measure these variables. Once we have identified the research instruments or the scales that we're going to use in our study, then we need to cite the original author. Also, mention in your article whether that instrument is adopted or adapted and the number of items per variable. And then it is very important that we cite the original source. Now, in the case that the scale is taken from another source and not from the original developer of that scale, then it is important that we cite both the one that we are citing and the original source. And it is important that we report the reliability of the scales measured in the source paper that we are borrowing. And then, when in our article, because we are limited with the number of pages, report only a sample item per variable. And then provide all the scales and the items in the appendix of your paper. The second one is the validation of our research instrument. According to scholars, if the research instrument is inaccurate or unreliable, then it will lead to inaccurate findings, and subsequently, it will lead to a misleading discussion and conclusion. So, what are we going to do? According to scholars, we need to report three essential procedures, and these are the phase validity, content validity, and the pre-testing results. Now, what is phase validity? Phase validity refers to the clarity, the appropriateness, the logical connections, and the format of the questionnaire items. Meanwhile, content validity refers to the relevance, representativeness, and comprehensiveness of the question items. Meaning to say that all the question items in our scale should be measuring the variables it intends to measure, and that the questionnaire, the format should be clear, logically arranged, and appropriate to the target population or to the target sample of our study. What are we going to report in terms of phase and content validity? According to scholars, we need to explain what phase validity is and what it does in a research. And then we are going to report how many experts were recruited to conduct the phase and content validity, what are their designations, what are their years of experience, and other inclusion criteria, why we chose them to be the experts that will test for the phase and content validity of the instrument that we are going to use in our research project. And then report the process by which this validity is conducted. And then also we need to report the experts' feedback in details and what are their concerns regarding the scale that we are using. And then also what are the revisions that were made from the original scale that we are using, and the revisions that were made after the phase and content validity testing. And then what are the experts' recommendations to better improve the research instrument. Meanwhile, pre-testing, the purpose of pre-testing is to ensure that the actual respondents of the study will understand all the question items in the questionnaire. So what are we going to report? We need to explain what pre-testing is and why it is carried out in the study. And then we will report the method that we employed in the pre-testing, the number of respondents, the respondents' feedbacks in details, what are the revisions that were made, which recommendations were ignored. For example, the actual respondents of the pre-testing suggested to improve the question items, but in our discernment, we think that it's all right. this recommendation can be removed, or it is all right not to incorporate this recommendation in the research instrument. And then how many rounds of pre-testing was conducted in that particular study. Now, you might wonder, what is the difference between pre-testing and pilot testing? Pre-testing is more focused on the detailed examination of our research instruments, especially the questions, the items, or the statements, in order to confirm that each question items are understandable to the actual respondents. Meanwhile, pilot testing is to check the feasibility, the clarity, and the appropriateness of the research instrument and the methods of your study in order to identify and fix any practical or technical issues that may arise. Pilot testing is for the entire study. Pre-testing is more focused on your research instrument. When conducting pre-testing, it should be conducted to the actual respondents, while pilot testing is to be conducted to a representative sample of your target population. The sample size for pre-testing will range from 30 participants, 5 to 10 participants, or 12 individuals. It's up to you, depending on the complexity and the length of your research instrument. Meanwhile, pilot testing can employ 25 to 30, 25 to 100 individuals, 10 to 30 individuals, or 10% of the sample projected for the study. It depends on you. Again, it depends on the complexity of your research instrument and the length of your research instrument. Now, the procedure for conducting pre-testing is cognitive interview, while pilot testing is actual interview. And the analysis for pre-testing requires no statistical analysis, while pilot testing will require that you compute for coefficient alpha. Now again, pre-testing is needed to ensure that the question items in your study are understandable to the actual respondents. All right. The third one is the sampling strategy. The chosen sampling technique, whether probability or non-probability, in your study must be justified. So, how do we report the sampling strategy? Scholars suggest that we need to mention what is the specific type of probability or non-probability sampling. You just don't mention this study employed probability sampling, but we have to mention this study employed simple random technique. And then you have to justify why. And then it's important that we cite who are the seminal authors about this different sampling technique. You might ask, am I going to use random sampling or non-random sampling technique? According to scholars, we will use random sampling technique if we have a sampling frame. What is a sampling frame? A sampling frame is a complete list of individuals, objects, or units in a population from which a sample will be selected. It makes sense that if you don't have the list of all the individuals that are intended to be your target population, then how can we do random sampling technique, right? Now, the advantage of random sampling technique is that it ensures unbiased, representative, and equal probability of the population of the study. Meanwhile, in the absence of a sampling frame, scholars say we will settle for non-random sampling. However, the criteria is that we should have a very detailed description of the inclusion and exclusion criteria as to who will be included in your respondents and who will not be included in your respondents. And the advantage for this is that you will have a higher response rate and therefore you will have more relevant data sets. Now, how do we report the sampling strategy? According to scholars, according to editors rather, we need to report what is the unit of analysis, an individual or an organization. And then we have to define the sampling strategy that was used in your study. And then report which specific type of probability or non-probability sampling technique that was used in your study. And then we need to explain why it was the most appropriate sampling technique. And then report if there are any inclusion and exclusion criteria that were used in selecting your respondents, especially if you are employing a non-random sampling technique. And then report if there are more than one sampling technique that was used and why. The next one in the checklist is the administration of questionnaire. It's very important that we have to be very, very detailed in reporting how we administered the questionnaire, whether it is online or face to face or through telephone. Whatever is the strategy that you use, we have to report it in details. So, first thing in reporting is that we need to explain who are the respondents of the study and why them. And then we're going to explain how the data was collected. Was it done in a single attempt or in multiple phases? If there were multiple phases, describe how many samples were collected in each phase of the study. And then report the mode of data collection. Is it face to face? Is it through mail? Is it through telephone? And then justify why you use that kind of data collection. And then indicate the proportions if there was more than one mode that was employed. And lastly, we need to discuss in details how the respondents were approached. Did we contact them through email? Did we contact them through face-to-face or whatever? We need to be very transparent and details when discussing how we administered the questionnaire. Next to report is how we protected the anonymity or the confidentiality of our respondents. And then report the overall duration of the data collection. When was the data collected? And then mention if there are external, natural, organizational, or cultural factors that may have affected the response rate or the mode of the data collection. Say, for example, because of the COVID-19 restrictions, the data collection was prolonged or the response rate was very low because of the accessibility or the geographical location of the respondents of the study. We also need to report any reminders that we sent to our target respondents of the study. How many samples were collected without a reminder? How many samples were collected with a reminder? Then we also need to report if there are statistical tests that were employed. For example, is there a significant difference in the response rate between those who were sent with reminders and those who were not sent with reminders? Actually, it depends on the procedure of your data collection. And then it's important that we report the response rate if applicable. However, if you are collecting data through online, then there is no need to report to the response rate because you don't know how many have received your invitations. Because probably in your instruction, you may ask your respondents, please share this to your friends. And you don't know how many friends of friends have received the survey. Therefore, we cannot actually compute for the response rate. Therefore, it is not necessary to report the response rate for online survey. And the next report is how many samples were collected and how many of them were excluded during the initial screening. And then report the exclusion criteria and how many samples were considered for final data analysis. This is in the case when you are going to report after you have identified the outliers of your study. So now that we have learned the details of reporting the methodology section of our papers, it is my fervent hope that we shall be able to publish more and more excellent quality papers in reputable journals. Thank you very much and good day, everyone. Again, this is Dr. S. from the University of Science and Technology of Southern Philippines. Good day and enjoy writing and enjoy publishing your papers. If you are interested to read more about the items that I have been sharing with you today, you can visit the references that I'm using in this report. Again, thank you very much and have a great day ahead. Thank you.